The next award is for the Champion Fancy Cheese, and this is also the New South Wales Food Authority's Perpetual Trophy. And the award this year from Northern New South Wales, Bangalow Cheese for their Nashua washed rind, Justin Telfer, the cheesemaker.
This year at the Sydney World Cheese Show, I judged over 80 different cheeses, including Nashua wash rind. I awarded Nashua a gold medal and it went on to win Champion Fancy Cheese. I decided to visit Justin at Bangalow Cheese Co in Northern New South Wales to find out what it takes to make a gold medal winning cheese.
So I've always loved cheese, but never really thought about being a cheesemaker. But I've also always wanted to do something with food, and I ended up working in the casino industry, and I was one of the managers in the VIP room at the casino in Melbourne. And that was pretty soul destroying, looking after private gaming players who were gambling millions and millions of dollars. And I actually found myself quite depressed, thinking, what am I going to do with my life? I want to live somewhere regional. I want to do something with food. I don't know how to link the two together and take the plunge. And a waitress walked past with this amazing board of cheeses, and the light went off, and I just thought, that's what I can do. I can be a cheesemaker. And I was up here for a long weekend, one weekend, and I thought, while I'm up there, I'll just see what your money can buy. And by the end of the weekend, I'd bought a property. So I was here for less than a year when all of a sudden I had a lease on a cheese factory and was up and running.
Most people don't realise wash rind cheeses are actually washed as they mature. I asked Justin to explain the process.
Pretty much the way I explain it to most people who ask me what a wash rind is, because a lot of people still aren't aware of what a wash rind cheese actually is. Mm-hmm. I explain it by saying it starts like a brie or a camembert, and then throughout its maturation I wash it every second day, and then that process allows it to develop a more orange sort of rind, as well as a stronger, more complex flavour profile. So my understanding is that a lot of Australian producers might just start with a brie or a camembert and just wash it. I actually have a much more complicated sort of recipe, I guess, for my wash rinds, and I've got lots and lots of different yeasts and moulds and different bacteria and things in there to try and develop some extra sort of flavour profiles. And my washing regime is a little bit different to a lot of other manufacturers as well, because I have different cocktails of wash mixes, and they actually get different wash mixes at different stages of their maturing as well. Literally, I just wash them by hand, and washing is probably a little bit of a funny term because I guess I'm sort of not really washing it, I'm just rubbing back that bloomy mould growth. I don't want to rub it so hard that I'm pulling the rind off the actual cheese, but I'm knocking back that white mould growth to try and encourage the other moulds underneath it and a bacterial rinds to form. So I do quite a lot of experimentation with different recipes and different techniques and processes of how I do things, just to come up with what is now the Nashua. But having said that, I'm constantly tweaking and adjusting and playing around with things, because I guess I'm on a constant crusade for perfection and improvement. Is the washed rind, which you're already reasonably familiar with.
Yes, I'm a big fan.
Let's see, it's wanting to grab onto the knife.
Yes.
Now, even though this is still reasonably young, the textures are already coming through the way that I like them. But one of the things I like about the washed rind is a sort of fudginess to the texture. Yeah. So that's what I'm looking for texturally for the washed rind. Sometimes they're more oozy than other times, and a lot of that's got to do with seasonality. One of the things I'm really focused on in my cheese making is I'm a big believer in seasonality, so I like to not adjust those aspects of seasonality artificially. I prefer to go with whatever the milk's doing at that time of the year, however it's behaving, and try and adjust the way I do things to compensate for that in an effort to achieve consistency. But I always say that I'm not trying to make a consistent product, I'm trying to make it consistently good. I get the milk from one herd. It's a single herd. It's a mixed herd of Friesian, Guernsey, Jersey, with a couple of brown Swiss thrown in there as well. So there's a good combination there of breeds to give a good quality milk. And I like to use a single herd because there's a little bit of bit more knowledge knowing what I'm working with, because I can see as the milk composition changes throughout the year with seasons or with stage of lactation, I can see that progression of where the milk's going. So there's a little bit more, I'm armed with a little bit more information about how I'm going to treat the cheese on the day that I'm making the cheese. Sometimes it might only need 2 weeks of washing. Other times it might need 2.5 or 3 weeks of washing. So I pretty much just continue that routine until they're at a point where I'm happy to wrap them.
Sure.
And that's sort of dictated by the way that the rind is forming, how the colour's forming, but more about the rind condition formation. I don't want them to be watery.
Yeah, sure.
I don't want, sometimes, you cut open a cheese and it's so oozy that it just runs everywhere and you're left with a rind and goo.
That's a fault when we're judging.
Yes.
We actually would mark a cheese down being that runny.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're just looking for a nice sort of seductive, flowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, consumers are looking for that too. Because the one that's most often asked about is the washed rind.
Okay.
Because I'll cut it on my board at the market and it'll have that seductive
Yes.
ooze.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, what's that?
I want some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then sometimes people get quite a shock when they taste it
Yeah.
because they're expecting it to be more like a brie
Creamy, yeah, okay.
and more mild.
It's a bit more assertive than they expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'm also aware of the condition of each cheese, and they do vary within the one batch depending on where they're situated in the tray. So if I find that one is more moist or one that's more dry, I can adjust the position on the rack because I know that the ones on the inside are going to be more moist than the ones on the outside. So if I've got one that's particularly dry, I might move it to one of the inside positions and swap it with one that's more moist so that it can firm up a little bit more if it's too moist. So again, I guess that's one of the things I like about having that personal attention every single cheese.
That's pretty good, isn't it? Those flavours are so deep. Just, it's really hard to put your finger on exactly what it is. Like you can almost taste like a bit of Vegemite, something a little bit like a beef stock. They
change
crusty
a lot.
bread.
Other
beer.
things come through more predominantly at other times. Sometimes they're like really truffly. Just
Okay.
truffle.
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes they're more broccoli or that sort of brassica. It might be kale or any of those sort of brassicas, and other times they're Vegemite. And
Yes. So Justin, I call Nashua a wash rind, but that's not quite technically right, is it?
Not quite. I call it a wash rind as well because to try and introduce yet another terminology into Australia where we don't even really, a lot of people don't really understand wash rinds, to then introduce the technical term which is mixed rind is just going to throw another whole spanner into the works. The technicality is that I actually leave some of this white mouldy bloom on the cheese, which is technically a mixed rind because it's a mix of that white mould as well as the washed rind character. Whereas technically a true washed rind doesn't have that white mould character. It just has the orange typical washed rind mould.
My mouth's watering, like just peeling it off the knife.
I'm really happy with that one. Like the rind as well is perfect for what I'm looking for.
But when you look at the rind, I mean, this one's fairly pale.
Yeah.
So you might think, oh, it's probably going to be a bit milder.
Yeah.
But that is a big, big flavour
Yeah.
inside that cheese.
Predominantly I'm focused on getting real flavours. And along with that, I'm focused on trying to educate consumers about the quality of Australian cheese. So I think there's still a little bit of a cultural cringe about Australian products and particularly maybe the dairy products because people generally have this thing about French cheese is the best cheese. Whereas I think there's some really good cheesemakers in Australia, and I guess, I'm just about trying to get some real flavours and some recognition that Australian cheese can be standalone in terms of quality and can run on an equal keel with the imported stuff.